Hey, this is Marc Lewis of ESPN, and you're listening to the Seleção podcast.
Simões bending one for Torres. Eusebio. Oh my word! Have you ever seen anything like that?
Bem jogado por Simão, a passar por dois adversários, Simão a tentar oferecer o golo a Figo e a bola é golo! O golo de Figo!
Rui Costa vai, acreditou, vai tirar para o golo, atira o golo! 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 Cristiano Ronaldo, vai embora Cristiano Ronaldo, mete, bateu, golo! Chuta! Gol! Gol!
And we welcome you to episode number 59 of the Seleção podcast. My name is Danny Pinto. I am your host. We are, of course, a proud partner of Portugal.net, and we are proudly talking about the World Cup bound Seleção on this episode number 59. And we thank you so much for joining us. We made it, guys. It wasn't easy. It was frustrating for probably the majority of it. But we somehow found a way to beat Turkey, found a way to beat North Macedonia. And we are on our way to Qatar, and so many questions about what could happen between now and Qatar. But the fact that we are talking about this national team heading to the World Cup is something that I know that I personally was hoping for, and I know so many of you were hoping for. And we are delighted to talk about it on episode number 59 of the Seleção podcast with Marc Lewis of ESPN. You can follow Marc on Twitter at Marc Lewis. That's MarcLewiseu. The Twitter handle will show up there on the scroll at some point and throughout the episode. But Marc, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Danny. Good to have you. I have recovered and I have survived the night, and I now get to begin all the anxiety building up to Qatar. So yeah, we're getting there slowly but surely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I first want to start off by sharing a tweet that Marc sent out shortly after the game, and it reads, "In years to come, we will forget the stress of these two matches. Records will show a 5-1 aggregate across the playoffs, and we will lie to our kids and tell them it was never in doubt. Hashtag Portugal." I'm not sure why we would have to lie to our kids, Marc. This seemed like a foregone conclusion and pretty straightforward, no?
No, not at all. And I think anyone that maybe watched the game, a little clearer than most, will acknowledge just how tight and how tense this was. Because again, in true, Seleção fashion, they like to try and make this difficult. We know there's a terrible long history of going the long way around. And again, they decided to do that in 2022. And I think if you look back to even just their results against Ireland, the results towards the back end of their qualification, not being able to lock it down at home in their final game, going on to be a penalty away from going into extra time with Turkey. It just never, ever felt comfortable. And the irony is exactly as we said, they're like, on paper, it's 5-1. A 5-1 aggregate should never have been in doubt and should never seem stressful. But I don't know if it's because we have our hearts in this or just because on paper it looked more comfortable. But to me, that just did not feel like a 5-1 aggregate win over two legs. It just felt always very, very tense. And that's probably because of the magnitude of what they're trying to achieve of getting to the World Cup. But I think that Portugal will probably still have a lot of questions that need to be answered. But the job was to get to Qatar, and that now has been achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it. Where guys like us that have such a personal investment in this team, both being Portuguese, both seeing that this team, with this group may have this last run in them. We'd hate to have seen the last run end in a playoff and not in Qatar. So yeah, I think at 5-1, the aggregate on paper says, yeah, you took care of Turkey, you took care of North Macedonia, as you should on paper. The score reflects that, but yet, the 85th minute against Turkey, it could have been 2-2, and I would say the first 25, 30 minutes of last night's match against North Macedonia, the Seleção just seemed very tight.
Yeah, they were flat.
Just
They were
not
flat, Danny.
yeah.
That's it.
It was it was a tough start, but then we got the goal from Bruno Fernandes. A nice break in what was a stronghold of a match where, North Macedonia, you could tell right from the jump there was not going to be a front-footed attack at all from them.
Yeah.
They were going to always be on the defense and on the counter. But I mentioned this on Twitter yesterday, and I don't. And the comparison is obviously it's an easy one, but by all means I don't mean it to be on equal footing. But we all think of, and I shouldn't say all, but the majority of us think of the Cristiano Ronaldo game as the game in which he scored the hat trick in the second leg against Sweden to put the Seleção into the World Cup for 2014. I'm not putting this game on equal grounds here, but for Bruno Fernandes to have 2 goals and they be the deciding goals, and him being the one on the score sheet that puts Portugal into the World Cup, I'm not putting that on the same ground, but to me, this could be known as the Bruno Fernandes game simply because of up to this point in his Seleção career, it's been inconsistent to say the least. And what I'm hoping is that this game is a springboard for his Seleção career. What do you think of his performance, and what do you think of what this could do for his career wearing the Seleção shirt going forward?
The irony is that I actually called for him to be benched for this game based on how he performed against Turkey. Yeah, that's it. Based on how he performed against Turkey, I thought that there was not enough reason in the bag to let him start in this final game against North Macedonia. So firstly, you're right. There's been a lot of pressure on him. There's been a lot of inconsistency. There's been a lot of very poor form coming his way. He's not living up to the hype. He's not living up to the name. He's not living up to club form that we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months. So originally to see him respond the way he did, to see him get the goals that will be regarded as you said, perhaps his fixture, his night of guiding Portugal through, I thought was a fantastic response. I thought it had come at the perfect time. And more importantly, because there's no denying that somehow the conversation always centers back to Cristiano. But for me, what I really enjoy is that we are now entering the stage of his career, this wonderful glittering career that you can talk about over 5 episodes of a podcast, where he is allowed to perform badly, he is allowed to be quiet, and Portugal still have enough in the tank to get over the line. And that certainly wasn't the case, 10 years ago, when if he had a bad game, Portugal most often than not had a bad game and lost the match. So whether it be Otavio that we saw in the first leg, or whether it be Bruno Fernandes now, it doesn't matter. I like the idea that we have young talent that is coming through. Yesterday was Bruno's night. He responded and silenced some people. And that hopefully will give him a lot of belief as well going into Qatar, that knowing that a performance like that, yes, it's against North Macedonia. Let's also be fair. He might not run through the Germans like that. But the reality is that he needed a result like that. He responded incredibly well. And I think he just showed as well that he has the talent to back it up on the international stage, and will probably be seen as a real go-to for the World Cup when they get there.
Yeah, you have to have a starting point, and yeah, it is North Macedonia, and credit to them. I thought their game plan, they ran it to perfection for the first half hour, and you could tell the frustration in the Seleção in terms of trying to get something going. But to your point on Bruno Fernandes, yeah, it has been an inconsistent start to his Seleção career, and you could see the brilliance at Manchester United, and you could see just the skill and the savvy that he brings to the field, and that just hasn't translated yet. And not that, again, this could be the Bruno Fernandes game that we see catapult his Seleção career. We don't know that. We all hope that it is, but I just feel like this could be just the turning point in his career with the Seleção. We are talking with Marc Lewis of ESPN as we are reviewing Tuesday nights, and I'm trying to get all my days correct here because it's been such a blur the last few days, but Tuesday night's win against North Macedonia to get the Seleção to the World Cup in 2022. I am your host, Danny Pinto. You mentioned Ronaldo, and there was another tweet that you had mentioned that it was nice to see the team be able to carry the captain in these 2 playoffs. A colleague of yours at ESPN, Mark Ogden, he wrote that Ronaldo is now part of a team rather than the heartbeat of it. and Portugal are a stronger unit as a result. I would disagree simply with I still think that he's the heartbeat of the team, but obviously what you and what Mark Ogden is saying now that there's too much talent here for him to put it all on his shoulders.
Yeah.
What do you see? How do you see his role? And this has been a discussion in these two matches. What do you see his role going forward, ideally for this team as we head towards Qatar in the winter?
I worry about his untouchability. I worry about his invincibility in the team. I think that anyone with a clear mind will probably want to see him come off the field in the 70th minute to allow for fresh legs. But if Fernando Santos has earned himself managerial equity, well, then Cristiano Ronaldo has earned himself player equity to probably never be subbed off. And even if that is to the detriment of the team, which is disappointing because a true football heart will want to see the team perform. And maybe that's where, again, probably deserved, but his arrogance gets a little bit in the way. How we see him going forward now, listen, he's been very quiet over the back end of qualifying and into the two knockout playout games. But the reality is that he's not going to be able to score every single game. I know we think he does, and he believes that he will. But it comes back to the point now where he has the ability to be quiet, to go into the shadows. Instead, rather work on tracking back, working on running lines, working on transition, working on captaining the team from the change room, because now those become more important roles because weight has been taken off his shoulders because there is goal scoring ability around him. So is he ever not going to be the star of the show? Absolutely not. Is he ever not going to be picked to play? Absolutely not. But I think the fact that he was carrying so much, he was carrying the captaincy, he was carrying all the marketability, he was carrying all the goals. The fact that he's able to just lighten a little bit of that weight and lighten some of that load now, I think actually it might just allow him to freshen up a little bit. Does he want to lose the spotlight? No, of course he doesn't. He's that kind of character that wants it. But
none of us do, Mark. None of us do.
I think the people that are now saying, oh, he's a dead weight, he's got to go because he's not scoring. I think much the same as in his club career now at Manchester United. If you are playing with him in that change room and you think of those younger guys that are coming up, what he will do in that change room, what him and Pepe will do in that change room, and I'm sure we'll get to him on his performance as well last night. But I think it now transcends so beyond the 90 minutes, whereas before, yes, he was always the leader of the team, but he was so forced to perform that now I think that weight has been taken off his shoulders.
You mentioned Pep, and it's amazing how much we think of a 37-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo and his influence on this team. And what his role is going forward. But at 39...
He's old enough to be some of the players' dads, Danny. Seriously. There are a couple players in that team, and if I think about it, he's 22 or whatever it is. Like, he could be father to some of these players. It's remarkable the longevity that he's got.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how someone at his age, the influence he has over that back line when he's in the lineup. And I thought he was very, very good again. But I thought he instilled some confidence and some influence on Danilu's performance too, because Danilo and José Fonte were very rough against Turkey.
It's always been a shaky back line for Portugal at times, and you would imagine that. Again, it's difficult to point fingers, but Fonte was definitely. He did the job. He was called upon, and he did a job. I'm not criticizing him at all. In fact, I'm complimenting him for coming to the party when it was required. But there's no denying that there was a completely different feel in that back line yesterday, knowing that you have players returning, and that's still without Ruben Dias as well. When he comes back, then it's a completely different makeup too. So to see the team come together better yesterday, to see Pep come back into the side, to see Danilo really step up, and that was arguably probably the best game. We talk about Bruno having the best game of his Portugal career. That for me was the best that I'd seen him play. And what a turnaround from the Turkey game where he seemed very shaky. So again, you talk about just the influence that these players have. And I think for Pep to be there at that age, to still be doing it, firstly, is incredible. But what he does to the people around him, I think, is just instill more confidence. He's almost the Carlos Puyol of Portugal, isn't he? Where he might not be the
That's
quickest
a great
anymore.
comparison. I love it.
Yeah, there was a stage where right towards the end of Puyol's career, he was getting beaten by younger guys. There was that famous Angel Di Maria turn for a Clásico where he split him open. And that's going to happen when you reach that age. But it's what he brings outside of that, what he brings with that, that you almost forgive being beaten, which he doesn't even get, by the way, as well. His reading of the game is exceptional. His talking to his players, to his teammates around him is exceptional. And I thought that really, really showed yesterday. And more importantly, it showed when he wasn't there in Turkey. So that absence is very, very felt when he's not around.
We're talking with Marc Lewis here of ESPN as we are reviewing the 2-0 victory the Seleção had over North Macedonia to qualify finally for the 2022 World Cup. The World Cup draw is this Friday, Mark, April the 1st.
Yes.
Already I can see everyone saying it's on April 1st. Portugal's going to get screwed. It's the group of death. But
do we ever knock the group of deaths? That's what I want to know.
But to be fair, the one thing that, another positive that came out of here is with Italy losing against Macedonia, the seeding 100%. So crucial. Portugal is going to avoid in the group play. They're going to avoid Argentina, Belgium, Brazil, France, England, Spain, and hosts Qatar. So right there, it's already a positive. We talk about the World Cup. Someone else who was talking about the World Cup yesterday was Fernando Santos. And all indications are showing us that Mister is going to be around for Qatar.
Yeah.
Let me get your thoughts on if you think he should be, and if he is, what the prospects of the World Cup look like with him still in charge.
He's a very unique case because, again, we mentioned just the term that you guys spoke about a few episodes ago about managerial equity, and you wonder how long managerial equity is able to hold. Is he the right guy to go to Qatar? Yes, absolutely. And the reason I say that is because I feel that if you were to remove him now, you would give yourself nothing more than a lifeline to blame when you bring in a caretaker manager now with a couple of months to go. Because if you had to bring a new manager in now, give him, what is it now, 6 months, 7 months, whatever the story is, it would be the perfect out for Portugal not to perform well and say, well, you know what, this wasn't my World Cup. I'm now going to work towards the following one because this wasn't my journey. So if the Portuguese Federation have put their faith behind Santos up until this point, to me it would be ridiculous, especially after securing qualification, to now remove him. I think it opens up a bigger conversation of what managers look like going forward. Because I think if you just think about how many talented managers there are from a young Portuguese perspective, Paulo Fonseca, for example, Leonardo Jardim is another one, Nuno as well, Vitor Pereira. So the talent is there, but Fernando needs his sign-off here. And I think that he was very brave in what he did in the Turkish lineup. I think it showed that when he wants to, maybe when he's really drawn upon, he is able to still go back into a really offensive lineup. And I think we were all surprised with some Turkey call-ups because it worked. He showed some bravery and it paid off. The problem is he just cannot go back into that shell in Qatar. This Portuguese team is the best when it's playing go-forward ball. And we've seen what happened in the late stages of qualification when we sit back, pressure comes, mistakes come, and we do not play well. So does he need to stay? Yes. Is this the end of the line for him? Absolutely. Will we forever be grateful with what he's done? Sure. But I think that there is a lot of really exciting young Portuguese managers that are coming up the ranks that would love the opportunity to coach this national team. And they have the young talent to match it as well. But I think getting rid of him at this stage is completely the wrong call. Give him one final opportunity to go out there with a bang.
You know, you're in the minority big time, I think, with a lot of people that I speak with, and while I disagree with your take there, because I think it's the perfect time if there were to be a change, simply because, and I talked about this with I've talked to so many people in the last week or so, but given that the qualification is now secure, you have these nation league games in during the summer that you can almost run almost as an extended like training camp with a new manager, because these games, they mean something. They're not on the level of European qualification or World Cup qualification, but you could start putting your own spin on it if you were Paulo Fonseca or André Villas-Boas or Leonardo Jardim, whoever it would have been.
Do you think the window is big enough, though, Danny? That's my concern, is that if you bring any of those talented managers in, and I still want to know when is Jose Mourinho going to take over a national team, but That's a different debate.
I don't want to talk about that at this point.
The media will tell you that his relationship with Ronaldo is strained to such a point that he will only manage once Cristiano leaves the national team. But that's a different debate altogether. But I just wonder if, for example, let's say you remove Santos now, right? And you put in a new manager and you give him 7 months. If it all works out and Portugal perform really well, it'll be seen as a genius masterstroke. If it doesn't work, my problem is that you're giving that new manager the perfect cop-out to say, I was not involved in qualification. This has not been my journey. I'm trying to pick up the scraps. I'm trying to make it work. So I'm not trying to say that you must throw Santos under the bus and let it crash so it's his problem alone. I just think that this vision to Qatar has been his and his alone. And I would rather finish the project with him than try and risk it now and give a new manager 6 or 7 months, which we know, especially in international football, there's probably going to be 7 outings before a World Cup game, or 6 outings, or 10 games, whatever it is. I don't think you can stamp your authority and your vision on a team in 10 games. And I just feel that gives us such an excuse to perform badly and blame it on this not being my journey. And I'll start going forward now in the next cycle.
I will counter your argument with what if we don't pull the trigger and then Fernando Santos goes back to his old tactics?
Yeah,
that's the fear. That's the fear from. So it's interesting conversation, that is for sure. We're talking with Marc Lewis of ESPN. He's kind enough to join us to talk about Portugal qualifying for the 2022 World Cup and his love for Fernando Santos. Obviously, guys, send all your messages to @MarcLewisEU. I'm just kidding, Mark. But honestly, to be fair, not everyone's going to agree on everything here. But you're bringing up good points. I will listen to them. I will respectfully disagree with them. But this is sports is debate. Sports is it's what makes sports and talking about sports so much fun.
The other big question, sorry, Danny, just
go ahead.
We move on. The other question about it is, you look in international sport as well, where teams perform badly and managers' heads are called for. I think the other debate that we would need to go into as well is, if you were to remove him, who truthfully is available? Because it's all good and well that teams perform badly and people riot and say, fire the coach, get rid of him. But, the Portuguese Federation would have to take a look at who is available truthfully, who are legitimate, available managers who are looking for international careers at the moment. So I think there's 2 sides of the coin that somehow are both on the same, because yes, you can get rid of him, but who comes in? You think of any bad competition where players or team members are calling for a coach's head, or fans are calling for a head, fine, fire him. Who is coming in? That to me is the big question. So if there was a candidate that was waiting in the wings, that then maybe changes my opinion slightly. But I think people sometimes get a little bit ahead of themselves and want to see the guy get out without really wondering, who then is going to be available to come back in. Because the last thing you want to do is get rid of what you think is the problem, don't get the right guy, and now all of a sudden you have a David Moyes situation at Manchester United. And what do you now do? Because now you've certainly screwed up the World Cup campaign. So again, it maybe just makes me on the lean towards the side of safety to say, just stick with him now. Let him finish the project. Let him say goodbye in a beautiful swan song or a ball of fire. Let him wrap it up and put to bed what has been his baby for the last, better part of almost 10 years.
Yep. All right. Again, agree to disagree, Mark. We shall move on. This team now, again, as you know, if you're living under a rock and you're listening to this podcast and you're just finding out that Portugal qualified, congratulations, guys, we made it. But now that we have, what would you like to see between now and Qatar in terms of the growth of this team, the style of this team, bring in players, sit players down? I guess what's your in a grand scope, what would you like to see happen between now and Qatar with this national team?
Yeah, I think that it's weird that you're talking about finding an identity just months out from a World Cup. But I think because there's been such schizophrenia with what Santos has been doing, I think probably the team itself doesn't even really know what its identity is. Because again, if you take a look at the back end of qualification versus the playoffs now, the teams look completely different. And the irony is that the makeup of the team is quite similar. The manager is the same. The captain is the same. The expectation is the same. But he's decided to play a completely different ball each time. So I think we all agree that we probably like the more attacking football that we saw against Turkey. So at the risk of putting that stamp on it and saying, make the Turkish game your blueprint, I think we definitely saw a very refreshing look on Portugal. So for me, I think it'll be about trying to identify which of those players that surprised us perhaps. And I think surprised us will probably be Diogo Costa in goal. I thought he was outstanding. I think to be able to then bring in Otavio was outstanding as well. And granted, we know that he probably feels very comfortable playing in Porto as well, but I thought Otavio was outstanding. I have questions just around whether or not Jota needs to start versus, João Felix. I don't know. People, again, will probably be quite torn on that. But that's more personnel. For me, it's about identity, because whether it's going to be João Felix or it's going to be Diogo Jota, it's about identity. Do we want to be attacking? Do we want to play really aggressive, go forward ball? Do we want to be the team that concedes 1 goal in 8 games and puts all the pressure on the back and then wins matches like that? Because people will tell you that, defenses win championships, but goals win you, defenses win you leagues, but goals win you championships. So what do? Do you put all the energy and the weight in João Felix and Ronaldo and Jota, etc., or do you lock up the back with a solid back four? My cry to Fernando Santos now is just show us what the game plan is. What do you want to do with João Moutinho? Do you feel that he is a rock in the middle? Do you keep him? Do you hold on to him? Do you have exciting talent that comes in, like Vitinha I spoke about? Is still very young, of course, but, do you go for a youthful side? Rui Patricio, does he now fall away completely? How do you risk all behind Diogo Costa coming in at such a crucial time? So for me, just find the personnel that are going to identify what the shape of this team will look like in Qatar. That for me is what these Nation Cups matches, where we play Spain in June, I think it is. So start using those games to show us what is going to be the approach to Qatar when we get there.
Excellent. Mark, you are in the Netherlands. You're in Eindhoven.
Yes.
I wouldn't be doing my job as a Portuguese soccer host, although I don't do the club thing very much. But for the Benfica fans that are listening to this podcast, what are your thoughts on the reports that Roger Schmidt is heading from PSV to Benfica, reportedly for next season? What kind of coach do you think is Benfica getting, and do you like the move?
Yeah, well, see, what I really like about the move, and I'll bring it back home for a second. What I really like about the move is that it then opens up the window for Ruud van Nistelrooy to come to PSV.
There you go.
Which I think is incredibly exciting. So for me, I think if that happens from a Dutch perspective, I think to bring back an iconic Dutch player to have him come and be involved in PSV, I think will be really, really exciting for them. From Roger Schmidt's perspective, geez, I think that I must admit, I never really watched a huge amount of German football when he was, certainly doing his thing there. I think that they too are probably looking for, a little bit of identity as well. I think that there's so much pressure to live up to expectation, to live up to hype, to live up to how things are looking now, because where do they find themselves at the moment? I know they're inside top 3, but they're probably still quite far off where Porto are now. So, and again, please correct me, I haven't really been keeping a very, very close eye on the Primeira Liga now, but I know that they're a little bit out of the pace, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, they're well backed on. They're third, but I mean it's a 2-horse race at the moment.
Okay, so they find themselves in third, Sporting probably then keeping it quite tight with Porto. But again, I call for identity for the national team, but Benfica will probably want to look at that as well, because with such a rich history, they want to be able to make sure that they continue competing for titles. They don't want to lose out to Porto, and they don't want to lose out to Sporting either. So when he comes in, what is he going to bring? How is he going to make them play? Does he know what Portuguese football looks like? Does he know what the fans are looking for? What are they in search of? So these periods of transition are always very, very tricky. And that's, again, the reason why perhaps I want Santos to stay. But I think if you bring him in, is he a good manager? Absolutely. Will he be able to find himself linked to how they play? I don't know. He's obviously, got a lot of history in the German league, and I think that German football is very different to what we see in Portuguese football too. So is he going to bring a very strict, structured German approach to Benfica? Will he allow himself to lighten up and play with a little more flair? I think it makes it really entertaining to see what he will decide to do.
Well, Mark, we can't thank you enough for joining us here on episode number 59, of the Seleção podcast. Before we let you go, how did you come across the podcast? I'm glad that we've formed this little relationship. I appreciate you reaching out. But how did you find the podcast, and how does one go from Madeira to South Africa to Eindhoven in one's life?
It's a really long story, I suppose. So my entire family are from Madeira, Seleção, in fact, although they kind of spread out over Preserves and Funchal as well, but generally more from Seleção. My dad moved to South Africa in the 1960s for the gold rush, like many Portuguese people do. It's why there's such a strong, rich South African, Portuguese culture there. Then as I got older, obviously started feeling more and more a pull to get back to Europe, a pull to get back into Europe completely. I have family in Portugal who I wanted to go and stay with, and they ironically said to me, listen, things are bad now, don't come here, try find somewhere else to go. So the Netherlands, looked to be a really good option. My wife and I moved out here, and started doing some football commentary for ESPN, which has been outstanding. Had a really good time there, doing a lot of, boxing and show jumping and broadcasting work, which is great. And that's how you find I would love to say young, but I'm certainly not anymore, like a middle-aged Portuguese South African kid living in the Netherlands, enjoying the European culture, enjoying having the PSV Eindhoven stadium just down the road. So again, I stay very close to the stadium. So when Ruud van Nistelrooy gets here, I'll be the first guy in line to go to the Philips Stadion here. I'm enjoying life. I'm enjoying being very close to European football. And I think in the year of a World Cup, it makes it really exciting to be this close. So I am keen and eager to see how Portugal play. And who knows, I was able to just miss out on Euro 2000. Ironically, I ended up going to Portugal for Euro 2000. And then in Euro 2004, when Portugal hosted it, I didn't get out there. So it's ironic that I'll end up finding myself missing these events. So now that I'm much closer to Europe, ironically still 8 hours away from Qatar, but I hope to be able to maybe spend a little bit of time in Portugal towards the approach of the winter, just to be closer there and get a feel of how the country is feeling ahead of the World Cup. So that'll definitely be my game plan at the end of the year, to try and get to Portugal for a few weeks, take it all in, and then come back home and watch the World Cup play out.
Awesome. Well, Mark, we can't thank you enough for making some time for us here on episode number 59. Make sure you guys follow Mark on Twitter at Marc Lewis EU. That's MarcLewisEU. My thanks to you again, Mark, and hopefully we can do this again very, very soon.
Absolutely, Danny. Thank you. We got some Nations Cup, as you mentioned. We got a few warm-up games, I have no doubt. So as we get further down the road to Qatar, let's continue chatting. Let's have the conversation. And more importantly, let's disagree, because that's what conversation is all about. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm all for a discussion. Even if we're on two sides very far from each other on that Fernando Santos thing, but I'll always have that discussion with you, Mark. Always. For
the sake of it, I will continue to fly my Fernando Santos flag, and I want anyone to just tell me why he needs to go. I'm happy to have those conversations and engage. So let's keep the conversation going.
All right, guys. Remember, at Marc Lewis EU, if you want to have those conversations. Mark, you're about to get flooded, I think. But once again, thank you so much for joining us on episode number 59.
Sure, Danny. Thank you so much.
And that will do it, guys, on episode number 59 of the Seleção podcast. Again, my thanks to Marc Lewis for joining us and being a part of our review of Portugal's 2-0 victory against North Macedonia to qualify for World Cup 2022. You can follow the show on Instagram and on Twitter at SeleçãoPod, Facebook.com/SeleçãoPod. Email the show, seleçãopod@gmail.com. And, of course, bookmark our website, seleçãopod.com. You can follow us and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you give us either 5 stars or give us the old thumbs up on the episodes, and subscribe to this podcast. We will have a reaction. That's a reaction episode to the World Cup draw, which takes place on Friday, April 1st. We'll have Tom Kundert on for episode number 60. We'll talk about that, and we'll also obviously probably discuss a little bit of Portugal's road to Qatar with Tom on our next episode. But that will do it for us on episode number 59 of the Seleção podcast. My name is Danny Pinto. I have been your host. We are a proud partner of Tom Kundert and Portugal.net. And as always, Força Portugal!